And joining me now, Julia Manchester's a reporter from The Hill. Julia, you know, the president's been calling this entire Mueller probe a hoax. What does he want? What's the end game here if he does agree to sit down with investigators? What's the message that would ultimately send to his supporters?
Well, based off of President Trump's tweet yesterday about Attorney General Jeff Sessions basically calling him to wrap the probe up, we basically see that he wants this probe to end. I think this is a lot of bad publicity for the president and his team, and I think the media coverage, in the president's view, is relentless. However, I think his, reported push to sit down with Mueller, could concern his attorneys because of this tweet. I mean, he keeps saying there's no collusion, no collusion. However, there is a sense that obstruction of justice could be a huge part of this investigation. I think a lot of critics and Mueller's team are looking at that tweet from yesterday as a potential sign of obstruction of justice, and they definitely want to look into that.
You know, your paper spoke to the president's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon. What did he have to say about the Robert Mueller investigation?
Yeah, so Steve Bannon basically said, I wish this investigation would wrap up. There's obviously nothing there. However, he did say that Robert Mueller was a good man and that the president should allow this investigation to go forward. So we've seen Bannon and the president really butt heads in the past. But I think right now, Steve Bannon is saying there's nothing there. Just let him wrap it up. But I think it was interesting in that conversation that my colleague had with Bannon is that Steve Bannon did side with conservatives in the House of Representatives who have called for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's impeachment in all of this, and what they say is his refusal to hand over key documents about the investigations into Russian collusion, meddling, as well as the investigations into Hillary Clinton and her email servers. So two different responses on the two men. President Trump has been very critical of both of these men and has kind of lumped this whole thing into this conspiracy against him. However, Bannon's responses were much more nuanced.
Meanwhile, Ivanka Trump today sat down for an interview with Axios. She was asked about the separation of families at the border. I want to play for you her response.
That was a low point for me as well. I feel very strongly about that. And I am very vehemently against family separation. And the separation of parents and children. So I would agree with that sentiment. I think immigration is incredibly complex as a topic.
I mean, immigration is certainly complex, but how exactly is the administration now approaching it? Do they think that they can push the scales on this with Congress in a midterm year?
Right. So, I think that's the goal at this point. However, the chances of that happening are so slim because it's such an incredibly complex, nuanced issue. And we've seen that Democrats and Republicans probably, in the case of in the months leading up to the midterms, this probably won't happen in that short of a time.
Ivanka Trump came out against her father's separation policy. But is this an aspect of the immigration issue that's likely to be a talking point for either party at this point in the midterms?
I think it's absolutely going to be a talking point for Democrats. I think Democrats are very likely to use this to paint the administration as they see it as inhumane. However, I think a lot of members of President Trump's base aren't necessarily against that policy. I think, they're for the zero tolerance sentiment of not letting illegal immigrants into the country. I think they buy into that. So, I don't think Republicans will run strongly on that. However, I think Democrats are very much going to grab a hold of that.
Yeah, certainly polling on both sides indicate nobody in this country really wants to see that happen either. Right. At the same time, you've got this feud that the president's engaging with the Koch brothers. Your paper actually heard from a pollster who said that she doesn't think that the Koch brothers are a good enemy for the president to have. Why?
Yeah, so we spoke with the director of polling actually at the Cato Institute, which, full disclosure, is a libertarian think tank and has ties to the Koch brothers. However, she did differentiate between conservatives and libertarians, saying that the Koch brothers are essentially libertarian and they're going to go against the president on issues such as tariffs and trade and regulations and those sort of things. So, but I think we also talked to a Republican pollster who pushed back against that, saying, well, the Koch brothers are conservative. They've supported conservative candidates, and he kind of took a dig into the Koch brothers, saying they've essentially supported Democrats, especially in such as Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, and her work with some legislation on the White House. So definitely an internal rift there between conservatives and libertarians. But I think it's good to point out that the Koch brothers have definitely pushed for more libertarian policies, and they are against the president on issues such as trade.
Lastly, before you go, I want to ask you, we know that President Trump is heading to Pennsylvania for a rally today. This is an area that he won last go-round, but President Obama won before that. He was in Florida on Tuesday. Are Republicans happy with the president's approach to midterms at this point?
Well, it's interesting because President Trump's approval rating seems to be sitting somewhere, sometimes it's in the low 40s or high 40s, but very low for a sitting president in their first midterm year, looking back at historical standards. But we've seen that overall Republicans are very happy with President Trump, and he seems to be doing very strongly with them. So I think his base, Republicans, very happy. However, if we're going to go into the general election, it's not very telling.
Julia Manchester, thank you so much for joining us, Julia.
Thank you.